Hey everybody, it's Evan Grant from the Dallas Morning News, dallasnews.com, your friendly neighborhood Rangers insider, here for another week of This Week in Rangers baseball. Y'all, back in Arizona with strange people surrounding my head as we reach the point where we are basically 2 weeks from opening day. This is the time when this team should start getting serious about decisions to make, and quite frankly, there really aren't a whole lot to make. The biggest concerns right now are the health of 3 of the 4 infielders, Corey Seager, Nathaniel Lowe, and Josh Young, all dealing with some degree of injury. And the hope is that both Young and Seager will be ready by opening day. I expect that Nathaniel Lowe will, like Levite Taveras a year ago, probably take a week, 10 days into the season before he's ready from an oblique injury. So on the decision-making front, came to camp with the idea, well, they're going to have to make a decision about whether or not they want to put Wyatt Langford on the opening day roster. And I really think that even with 2 weeks left in camp, Wyatt's really kind of rendered this decision no decision. He's knocked it out. Leads the major leagues, or was entering Wednesday in OPS this spring. He's hit 4 homers, was tied on Tuesday for the major league lead. He's just been outstanding. It's been a Cinderella story. Actually, it's not been a Cinderella story because he's been expected to just do special things on the baseball field, and he has. I think the most impressive thing by the Rangers evaluations is that, look, early in spring, they saw a little bit of an adjustment they had to make to his swing. It was very, very minor, but he was having some trouble getting to the top of the strike zone for fastballs. And the Rangers have always thought, look, this was going to be something at some point in time that he may have to deal with, but certainly when the guy put up a 1,200 OPS his first year in professional baseball, there was no reason to address anything. But he came to spring training, looked like teams were trying to take advantage of the upper reaches of the strike zone for him, and Rangers basically asked him to make a small adjustment, something he's done previously, where he moved his hands up, and so he didn't when he got into his load position, he didn't crouch so dramatically and didn't put himself basically below the ball. Did that one day, the next day saw results, and has been seeing them ever since. Told the Rangers that, look, he's coachable, that he can take an adjustment and make it very quickly and get results very quickly. And so, listen, I think that, yeah, there's a lot, I suppose, that could happen over the next 2 weeks, but I don't think anything can happen that's going to impact the way this club thinks on Wyatt Langford that would not have him opening the season on the roster as the primary DH, playing some outfield, rotating around some of the outfield spots. Well, he'd play left field. Other guys like Evan Carter primarily would end up rotating to center and left and right occasionally to give both Adolis Garcia some times at DH, give Levite Taveras some time off, maybe against right-handed pitching. It's just been kind of everything the Rangers could have expected, hoped for, not expected, hoped for, and more. And I think, look, right now, I think as they sit here, they're thinking that Wyatt Langford probably fits in this batting order in a number 3 spot, sitting right there behind Corey Seager and in front of Adolis Garcia. And as one club official told me earlier in the week, there are 4 things that the Rangers were looking for, I think, or any team looks for when you want to put a young player that doesn't have much professional experience whatsoever, and make this jump to them. And the first is that they've got to be talented, and check. The Rangers knew that when they drafted Langford 4th overall. 2, he had to perform, and Wyatt has performed. 3, there had to be an opportunity, and there is. The Rangers do need a bat at DH, and this team does seem to have a need for using a 4th outfielder as a DH. It would suit the lineup best. And the final thing was also that, you needed to have a lineup around where you had enough veteran players so that there wouldn't be a ton of pressure on that kid, that he wouldn't be asked to do too much. And it's hard for me to envision a situation in which a guy is asked not to do too much, or a guy is protected better than sitting behind the American League runner-up in the MVP and a guy who's a 35 home run guy and 100 RBI guy. So I think that all the boxes the Rangers have had to see have been checked really, really well by Wyatt Langford. So I expect that the Rangers will go into the season with 2 rookies in this lineup, in Carter and Langford. Both of them would be eligible for Rookie of the Year. Both of them would be eligible for the player performance incentive package that comes along with that, if they were to finish 1st or 2nd in the American League Rookie of the Year. If one of those guys finished 1st in the American League Rookie of the Year, the Rangers would end up getting a draft pick after the 1st round next year. The players would get some incentives in the player performance pool. They would get a full year's service time regardless of whether or not they were in the majors the whole year. And I think that's rendered kind of moot, because it doesn't make any sense to try and manipulate the roster now to keep a guy from getting a year of service time, because if you do bring him up a month into the season and he still ends up winning Rookie of the Year, then he's going to get a full year of service time retroactive. That's part of the performance program. I don't know if I'm explaining that clearly enough, but the bottom line is there are no real incentives for the Rangers to try and manipulate his service time at this point. If he's one of the best 26 players, best 13 position players on the defending world champions, he should be on this roster. And right now, as I've written this week, Wyatt's playing at a level that's had him as perhaps the best player in all of baseball this spring. So that's where I think that stands. And now let's move on to the question that has dogged this franchise for 50 plus years. We'll dogs it again this spring. I imagine we'll dog it until the end of time. And that is, what's the deal with the rotation? We've spent a lot of this winter wondering whether or not the Rangers were going to bring Jordan Montgomery back. I talked with his agent, Scott Boras, earlier this week. Scott laid out a great case for why Jordan Montgomery fits with the Rangers. Hit a lot on what he might mean to creating this franchise as a legacy championship franchise. All of them are good points. But it also sounded a little bit like an agent who's dealing with a surplus of pitching on the market, who doesn't have homes for those guys, 2 weeks left in spring training. He sounded a little bit desperate, and maybe he is. I think it's possible that he could be both desperate and that the Rangers could be a good fit. I also think it's possible that the Rangers aren't moved by anything that Boras has said. They have indicated at every stretch of the offseason that it just doesn't appear that they're going to sign him. We can talk about the financial implications all we want. This team is, to cite the idea of two things being true at the same time, this team has a higher payroll than it's ever had at $243 million. But basically the payroll is also unchanged from where it was at the end of last year, $242 million. And there was certainly a windfall of revenue that comes with winning the World Championship. Boris estimated that winning a World Series is worth about $27 to $30 million for a club. And listen, I think the Rangers lost money with this roster in 2022 on the books. I think that at the gates last year, the Rangers probably made some money. Certainly not enough to offset what they lost in 22. They are going to take $12 to $20 million less in TV revenue this year after the negotiation with Bally Sports Southwest parent organization. They will probably make that up with increased ticket sales. I think they're running about 1,500 season tickets equivalencies ahead for this year. Probably cost that out at, or average that out at about $100, $150 per ticket, parking, and concessions. And so I think all of that is a wash, but at this point in time, they're not willing to take the next step and make that next big payment of $25 million or whatever it would cost to sign Jordan Montgomery. I still also think that doesn't mean they're done on the starting pitching front. Look, their 5 starters in camp have pitched well, the 5 healthy ones. Nathan Eovaldi's looked really good. Andrew Heaney had a really good start against Cleveland on Tuesday. Cody Bradford has done everything he can to earn the 5th spot in the rotation. John Gray and Dane Dunning haven't pitched a ton of innings in A games, but they've seen fine. The rotation has a 3.86 ERA. Not that any of that part matters in Arizona. What I do like is that they're averaging about 3 walks per 9 innings. So they are throwing strikes, and they're averaging over a strikeout per inning here in Arizona. So those are all good signs for the 5 guys they have healthy. But if one of those guys goes down, they really don't have a whole lot of depth. I think at this point in time, their most likely option, if they had one of those guys go down with an injury in spring training, would be Adrian Sampson, who has pitched really well on a non-roster contract. But listen, Adrian Sampson is a guy who has juggled between being a long reliever and a spot starter on second division clubs for his entire career. Owen White, Zach Kent, Cole Winn, all sent to the minor leagues very early in camp. Very clear message that they are not ready. Jack Leiter's still here, and I think as much of the reason that Jack Leiter is here is he's pitched well, he's made improvements, but I also think the Rangers want to build his confidence. Hey, you've done well, we want to reward you. I don't think Jack Leiter's in any position. I don't think there was any scenario the Rangers came to camp with this spring where they said Jack Leiter could pitch his way onto this roster. And I think it would be a fool's errand to change that thinking with 2 weeks left in camp. So there is still a need for starting pitching. And if Montgomery's out of the picture because of the cost, well, another possibility emerges, and that's Dylan Cease, the White Sox ace, who is coming off of a down year, but has pitched really well this spring. And again, for me, what I've most liked is I compared his spring numbers with where he was last year. The walks are really down. He's commanding the strike zone again a lot better to go with what appears to be a bump back up in velocity. His velo was down just a little bit last year. White Sox are in a position where they probably need to deal him, need to maximize his value with 2 years left of control. And I think it made a lot of sense for them to take Cease to spring training, let him pitch, and show teams he's healthy, that he wasn't, that the way his stuff backed up last year wasn't permanent. Rangers have sent a bunch of scouts over to see the White Sox. They had multiple scouts at the White Sox start or the White Sox game on Tuesday night where Cease pitched really well. I've run into a basic army of White Sox scouts here in Surprise watching the Rangers play. So I think there's some reason to think that those 2 teams might be a fit. Cease is only going to make $8 million this year. So it wouldn't push the Rangers from the first tier of the payroll tax into the second tier. Probably about a difference in what Montgomery would cost this year and what Cease would cost. Probably a difference of about $15 to $20 million in total cost, which is significant. But the cost would also include some talent, some young talent. I think you'd have to look at the possibility of dealing Ezekiel Duran, who right now is a guy who deserves a chance to play every day on a club. He's got that kind of ability. But I also don't think if the Rangers wait until Corey Seager gets back and Josh Young gets back, he's going to go back into a backup role. And no team is going to think, well, this is a guy that we have to pay value as an everyday player for. I think the spring is a little bit of an exception. So I think you'd have to look at a package that includes Duran at the top. I think the Rangers make that more feasible by picking up Jose Barrero on a waiver claim from the Cincinnati Reds, a former top prospect. He's a middle infielder / outfielder, right-handed hitter like Duran. I think in a lot of ways, he's certainly not as advanced as a hitter as Duran, swings and misses a lot more, but he's the same age, got a huge talent profile, and there is every possibility that if you're looking for a guy who's a bench / project type guy, Barrero might fit even better on this roster than Duran would once you get everybody back. So if you could lead a deal with Duran, I think it makes some sense, but you'd have to include several other players. I think Justin Foskey would have to be a guy who would be included, or at least thought about. He's a guy who also doesn't have a real path to the major leagues here. He is hitting, and that is where his value lies. And if he gets hurt, if his bat slows down at all, he's going to lose some value. So it might make sense to get value out of him while it's high. And then you'd have to get into some degree of pitching. I've played around with a couple of different potential packages. I don't know if one of the starters from the Cole Winn, Owen White, Zach Kent group moves the needle enough. You'd probably have to include a reliever, maybe somebody along the lines of a Yuri Rodriguez, maybe even a Grant Anderson, something like that. I think you're looking at a 4-for-1 package, or maybe you could talk the White Sox into a 4-for-1 or 5-for-2, where they include Garrett Crochet, the reliever, hard throwing reliever, coming back to Rangers way. So I think that's something to certainly monitor as we go forward. And I think it's something the Rangers have to weigh, is spending $20 or $25 million extra for Jordan Montgomery more expensive than spending $8 million this year for Cease, plus probably what would be about 15 next year. And the talent pool that you'd have to give up in order to get him. Would that be worth it? Plus, there are other teams that are going to be in the market for Dylan Cease at this point. I think the Yankees certainly are investigating. The Yankees stand to be without Garrett Cole for at least a month, perhaps 2, maybe more with an elbow issue. So that's worth monitoring. But I do think that there is reason for the Rangers and the White Sox to continue talking. Be interesting to see with the prospect game, the prospect breakout game on Thursday. And I think 22 of the Rangers' top 30 prospects will be participating in that game against prospects from the Cincinnati organization. Be interesting to see just how many White Sox officials are here to watch that. And I think really that's it for right now. You know, the biggest decision was about Wyatt Langford. The biggest question was about the pitching staff. The bullpen is sorting itself out. The one good thing I think that the Rangers have seen is that they feel like on the bullpen side, they've got more viable options going into the season than they did last year. Most notable among those is the fact that Jose Leclerc appears healthy. His fastball isn't slower like it was at this point in time last spring. Josh Sborz has been more effective than he was last spring. There is reason to believe that the bullpen is deeper and has more options. And even the young pitchers, particularly Mark Church, Jake Latz, and Daniel Robert, have all pitched really, really well in spring training. So I think they feel pretty good about those possibilities at this point. Still a long way to go. 2 weeks left till opening day. This is the time where guys do start to separate with themselves from one another. I'll give you one example. Jesus Tinoco has pitched great, shown a great fastball. The other day, pitched into the third inning, walked a guy with 2 outs in the ninth, and then failed to make a pick on a ground ball right back up the middle. Those are the kinds of things that you start to think about when you're having to make decisions between who's the 26th guy and the 27th guy in your roster pool. But all right, I've droned on enough. I know that you guys have thought as much about this picture this spring as a Monet or a Matisse, all of which are currently available at the Dallas Museum of Art. Great exhibit that we went to see when I was back home last week, when I was trying to show my wife I was not just a baseball slob, but also a refined and cultured human being. That's why I go with the intellectual look sometimes. Anyway, I'll talk to you before the season starts. I hope you've been enjoying these. You know what to do. Like it, subscribe, ask for more. Shower me with gifts. I don't know. No, you don't have to shower me with gifts. But please like this stuff and give me your feedback. All right? We'll see you soon, everybody. Good video.